Today we've got the Flex FX3211 24 volt die grinder. Yes, it's a brushless tool. Pretty much everything that Flex releases is a brushless tool. Let's get started. The FX3211 has several features that aren't found on your typical die grinder. So if you're used to a corded die grinder, quite a bit different of a tool, and we're going to explain all those features, and then we're actually going to use this. Then we'll come back and talk about pricing and warranty. And by the way, we have several tips for you along the way as well. Let's jump right into this. This is the Flex FX3211-Z because it is a bare tool only. I don't even believe you can get this as a kit. So pretty much what you get in here is the die grinder and the wrench as well. So it has a spindle lock on it, which we'll cover here in just one moment. And then you have a wrench to release the collet nut. Now taking a quick look at this before we put a battery on it, from the end of the collet to the end of the tool, right at 16 inches. That's pretty much the only real measurement you probably even care about. It's about 3 inches and pretty square at the widest point here. So about 3 by 3 through the main body here of the tool, and again 16 inches long. Now we have a pretty deep snout here, and that's so that you can hold and control that tool with your front hand, and then the other hand is back here on the main handle of the tool, where you can also reach the slide lock switch. So it is a slide lock die grinder, most are. And then we get a spindle lock right here. So we do have a wrench for the actual collet nut, but we don't have to have a secondary wrench on the flats of the spindle. You can still use one. You can see the flats there, but you don't have to. You can push the spindle lock, and when it gets to a place, it will actually fall in right there. And you can hold that, use the wrench to release that. We'll show that here in a few moments when we put a bit in there. This is a brushless tool, runs on their 24 volt battery platform. I like to see right here we have some removable stainless steel mesh, and that's going to filter out any particles as you're grinding and sanding to keep that from entering the electronics and the motor and all the sensitive stuff inside this tool. Now, the reason this is important, it's pretty obvious, but this is a little different than your old, plug-in die grinder that has brushes on the motors. There's a brushless motor in here. There's also a lot of electronics in here. And what happens is all your air, so there's a big fan in here, and that fan running off the motor pulls air in right here. And when it pulls that air in, it pulls that air and blows it across all these electronics and then escapes all the way up here. So that air pulling all the way through here and pulling through the electronics, we want to make sure that we're filtering that air and not bringing in all that metal debris to blow across all that. So it's very important to, number one, have these, and number two, from time to time, pull them off, blow them out, maybe even rinse them out if you want to, and to keep those clear of debris, to keep that breathing very well. And there's one on either side there, very easy to pull those off and to clean them out. Just like all other Flex tools, we get a nice rubber overmolding here on the grip, so easy to hold this tool. It's not going to slip out of your hand while you're grinding. Now, a really cool feature on this die grinder that you won't find on most of your typical old die grinders that you're used to is the fact that we can control the speed. With a quick push of a button, we have 4 different speeds that we can control with the Flex FX3211. Now, the max speed on this is 28,000 RPM, which is interesting because a lot of your bits, wire brushes, things like that, will have a max of say 22,000 RPM. So this is going above that. So take note of that if you are using wire wheels and things like that, and look at your accessories and make sure that you're operating in that window, because you can go above and beyond that with this tool. Now we're going to pair this tool with the 3.5 amp hour stacked lithium 24 volt battery, which I think is a great battery. It's kind of that mid-size, still offers a lot of runtime, offers plenty of punch, but at the same time stays nice and slim with that stacked lithium, and gives you the ability of a little bit of a lighter tool, but again, giving you runtime. So let's go over the actual speeds on this. By the way, this is a slide lock switch. If you haven't used one before, you're going to push this up and it's going to lock into place. To shut this off, we can just push right there and it's going to unlock. Now, if I just wanted to run this momentarily, I can push on the back side here, and when I release, but if I push it up and push up on the front, that locks it into place. And anyway, when I turn this on, now you see these buttons light up right here, and I can choose what speed I want. Low is 10,000 RPM. Speed 2 is 16,000 RPM, speed 3 is 22,000 RPM, and speed 4 is 28,000 RPM. So make note of that so that when you're using your accessories, you're not over speeding those or overturning those. And if you haven't seen these flex batteries before, they're amazing as far as the fuel gauge is concerned. If I push this button here, you can see those 4 lights light up on either side of that battery. So there's no question at all how much life we have left in that battery. In this case, it's fully charged, but I love their indicator on their batteries. Now let me briefly touch on, as I have already, is like accessories, bits, things like that. Now, here's an actual die grinding bit where we're actually, cutting metal, cutting aluminum, things like that. All of these, I should say, at least with an asterisk, with a little bit of a surety, that most of your die grinding bits are made to turn that 22,000, 25,000, 30,000 RPM. Again, make note on the package of what they are, but they're not meant to spin just like, say, 5,000 RPM. However, when you get into wire wheels, make sure that you see how many RPM they recommend, because if you look at this one, this is made for like a drill. This is max of 4,500 RPM. So if you take this and you spin it at 20,000 plus, I promise you all these little curly Q pieces of steel fragment are going to go flying, and they like to find your skin. So make sure you're not running something like this in a die grinder, and make sure your wheels are certified at the RPM you're going to be turning. Like this one here says 25,000 RPM, so I'm good with that. Most of your cutting wheels are fine. Now here's a wire wheel that's specified at 22,000 RPM. It's from Weller, so this one I'm safe to spin at that speed. Still, make sure you're wearing safety glasses, because even so, these little things here will still like to go flying, and they will embed themselves into your skin if you're not wearing protection. Now let's touch on one more thing before we actually go use this. I'm going to take my battery off, and we're going to take a look here at this collet, because I really am not sure yet, but I'm going to push my spindle lock. I'm going to take this collet off, and I believe this is a safety collet. And what I mean by that, and this is something that's been used on routers for years, but really just finding its way into die grinders, small die grinders, big die grinders. And I've reviewed die grinders in the past, cordless ones that had this on there, and people comment with horror stories on talking about they can't get their bits out, they've put it in the vise, they've hammered on them, and they're used to a regular collet and not a safety collet. And let me explain what happens here. And one of the telltale signs typically is that when you pull the spindle nut, or when you pull the collet nut off, that the collet actually stays in there. And as you see here, it's captured in there. Now, if I wanted to, I could probably push that out, and I could pop that out and pop it back into place if I wanted to. But anyway, it's kind of all one piece. So let's put it back here in the tool. And then we will slide this bit in here. And you can see it's still sliding right there, but I'm going to push the spindle lock and tightening my hand. It's now getting a little firmer, but now I'm going to use my wrench, really tighten that down. And so now my bit is in there. So now I can use that tool, and that tool is going to be in there. And again, let me make sure that I'm tight. Okay, now I'm ready to take out my bit. I'm done with this job. Maybe I'm going to change out to a wire wheel or a sanding disc, or maybe to a ball mill or to a ball end. So I want to take that out. So I'm going to push my spindle lock again right here. I'm going to find it where it kind of sinks in. There we go. Now that locks into place. And I'll loosen my collet nut. So now that collet nut is loose, okay? So you can see it's freely turning right there. However, I cannot get this bit in or out. It's not loose. Now the thing is not to hammer on it, because most people with other die grinders think, well, just bump it one time, it'll slide in and be free. And you can see it's still locked into place. And again, that nut is loose. So what you have to do is once you loosen it, it'll break free, it'll turn once or twice, and then get hard again. And all you have to do is break that free once again, and now watch what happens. Now that's loose as a goose. So that's what a safety collet does. If that nut backs off, it doesn't just let that bit go flying, it still locks that into place. So don't get frustrated, just make sure that you're loosening that twice when you go to remove your bits and change them out. So we're going to start just on some thin metal. Well, thin metal when it comes to typically doing die grinding stuff. This is like 1/8 inch wall stuff. I think this is like 2x3 or 2x4 steel. Yeah, 2x4 and again 1/8 inch wall. And I'm going to switch out my bit really quick here to a cone, or what we call a Christmas tree type of bit. Give it a little stick out there. And I'm going to set this at 22,000 RPM. And I could easily go around and kind of dress these holes up. I can also do some cutting. So you can see if I wanted to keyhole something or if I wanted to slot something, this is a great tool to do that with. If you don't have some sort of end mill or something like this, that's where a die grinder comes in very handy to be able to do things like this. All right, now we've got a piece of 1/4 inch aluminum. It's actually diamond plate aluminum, but still it's a piece of aluminum in the vise here. And let me give you a little tip when using a die grinder on aluminum, because let's say you want to, you want to port that small block Chevy manifold you've got sitting in the garage and modify your mom's van. Anyway, before you do something like that, here's a couple of tips for you. Number one, you can get burr bits made for aluminum, and basically the spacing between the teeth here are a lot broader because aluminum is softer and it will like to gum up a bit like this. Let me show you. And I'm going to go ahead, well, you know what? I'm going to leave it in the same speed that we had it in, speed 3. And show you something. So you can see it initially started cutting and then stopped. Now look, basically that whole burr bit is now, wherever I had that, is compacted with all that aluminum. So you can do a couple of things. Number one, probably wouldn't hurt to slow it down just a touch. I'm going to go down a speed. Number two is if you're not going to have aluminum burr bits and you're going to run regular bits, make sure you put wax on the bit and keep wax on it. You can even put it in here and run it. And fill those teeth with wax. Now, I'm using some Brute Lube wax for like drilling, tapping, things like that. Candle wax will work, paraffin wax will work, and basically what that wax is going to do is provide as a lubrication as you start cutting. The heat builds, it'll keep that aluminum from building up in there, but you will have to keep dipping that in that wax to keep it from filling up, and I'll see if maybe that will clean out as well. So you can see now the aluminum's not building up, and in fact it's starting to clean out where that wax is getting under there and freeing that up. So you can see what a difference it'll make. I ran that less time than this and it kept cutting. So keeping that lubed up. with some wax will definitely aid in allowing you to cut through aluminum. Otherwise, you'll be taking and picking out all those aluminum fragments, which it looks like I didn't have enough wax in there, and I'm going to have to do that. So you can use it in aluminum. You can run regular burr bits in aluminum, but you have to keep it waxed up, have to keep it lubricated to keep it from embedding itself in all the teeth. That bit's not ruined. You can still clean that out and use it again, but just a tip when grinding aluminum or die grinding aluminum. We'll lift this up and see if we can't get it to clean out. You can see those teeth are starting to clean out. There's just a few pieces left in there. You can get that cleaned back out and cutting well. So a few pieces left in there, but not bad. And I slowed that down all the way down to 10,000 RPM. And it makes a mess. And just another tip for you after using this spindle lock, I like to really tighten those bits down. These things are spinning at 20,000+ RPM. This spindle lock's kind of a pain to hold and to use this wrench to loosen them. So I'd recommend get you just a 13mm wrench. We'll go on that spindle, on the flats of that spindle. And then you can put your other wrench on there, your collet nut wrench. Offset them, little push, break free just fine. So I'd recommend getting you a 13mm wrench, or you may have another spindle wrench you use already, versus using the spindle lock. This will be fine if you don't like to tighten them down. I like to really wrench them down, so just another little tip for you. And it's not just thin metals and aluminum. 1/4 inch thick steel, no problem with cleaning up, again, your edges, things like that, depending on which bit you've got. So typically you might clean up these outside edges with a grinder, a typical grinder, but then to get in those inside edges, you can take a die grinder and be able to reach those. Then even cleaning up those inside corners. This is a great performing die grinder, and it will accomplish all the tasks that you would typically do with your plug-in die grinder or your other cordless die grinder. We like the fact that we can actually control the speed on this as well. So if we're slowing down to do aluminum, or if we need to slow down based off of bits that can't turn 28,000 RPM, which in this case, this wire wheel will turn at 22,000. And with that said, be sure to follow the recommendations on those accessories, because the last thing you want is something flying apart and flying at you because you're overturning them or overspinning them. The other thing is, there are some tools that you can get by with your safety squints. This is not one of those. If you're grinding aluminum or steel, those shards are flying everywhere. Highly recommend safety glasses, even recommend a shield to really protect your whole facial area and head as well, because it will be flying all around you on that. But great performing tool. Again, we love the speed control on it. I also recommend, if you're like me and you really like to get tight on those collets to keep your bits in place, then go ahead and plan on having you, and typically if you've got tools like this, you probably already have the spindle wrenches and things, but just a typical 13mm wrench will do fine. You don't have to grind it down or anything. It'll fit on that spindle, and then use your collet wrench to loosen the nut on that. Pricing on this is $219, and you get a 5-year warranty. But if you register this tool within 30 days and you purchase it before December 31st of the end of this year, 2023, then you can actually get the Founder's lifetime warranty on this tool. So be sure to register your Flex tool within 30 days of purchase. You can do that online, and then you get the Founder's lifetime warranty. Otherwise, it's covered by the standard 5-year warranty on this. So check it out for yourself. Again, it's the FX3211. Also, keep track of us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and even TikTok. And if you don't mind, would you hit that like and subscribe button if you haven't done so already? And by all means, if you hated our video, well, give us a thumbs down. But would you let us know in the comments why? Have a great day. Keep smiling.